Today we're going to be talking about one of my personal favorite theories, the existential theory for counseling. If you remember, the Gestalt theory tied in some of the components of existentialism. However, there are some key differences that really allow this theory to stand on its own. So let's go ahead and begin. Though the idea behind existential theory has been around for centuries, there are three main people that really connected it with therapy. The first, Viktor Frankl, shared about how he developed meaning and purpose even while suffering as a prisoner in the Holocaust. He even wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning, that really tells his story. He also really focused on the relationship that he has with his wife that helped him get through such dreadful times. The second individual, Rollo May, became extremely ill, and as he became healthier, he examined his life and made use of what he called existential healing to help him define the theory. Lastly, Irv Yalom reflected on his own life experiences, which helped then influence and create the major components that make up existential theory, which we'll be looking at more closely here in a second. Existentialism, much like Gestalt, is all about experience. Existentialism looks at what it really means to be human. That means how people construct their own lives and the definitions they give to the things in the world. One of the things that makes existentialism unique is that the theory does not really have any particular techniques to pull from. Instead, it's all about helping people construct who they are as a person. This means helping people examine who they really are and who they want to become. It's a matter of finding balance in order to identify limitations as well as what is actually possible. Existentialism holds the belief that people are constantly growing and changing. This primarily occurs when there is something in our lives or in the world that does not seem to fit the way that we define ourselves or the world around us. In order for things to make sense, we must consistently adapt and grow. As I mentioned earlier, Yalom helped to define some of the major components, or givens, that make up who we are as humans. So let's begin looking at those.
As I just mentioned, there are 6 main dimensions to the existential theory. Your text laid out the capacity for self-awareness as the first dimension to review. This is because, as people become more self-aware, it opens up the opportunity to explore and address the other dimensions that make up the existential theory, which I will be going over here shortly. As people become more in tune with themselves, their lives become much more fulfilling, and they're able to live the lives that they want. Additionally, self-awareness includes the ability to expand and or restrict consciousness. If people tend to restrict their consciousness, that means they have a hard time seeing different perspectives. If consciousness is expanded, people are then able to gain perspective, look for alternatives, and find out what really motivates them. The challenge about being more self-aware is that it may also cause some sort of distress or turmoil for a person, because they are looking at things that make them feel uncomfortable. However, with self-awareness also comes the ability to change and grow and gain that fulfillment. As people become more self-aware and their consciousness is expanded, people then begin to realize that there is the ability to make choices. This moves into the second dimension of freedom and responsibility. People have the freedom to choose how they react and do the world. With that comes a significant amount of responsibility. As people go on living their lives, they have the ability to reflect on their experiences, choose how they act in the world, which then allows them to make change and work towards becoming the person that they want to be. With this means that people can choose to go about living their lives, which either allows the ability to truly know themselves and expand their consciousness, which then allows for an authentic life, or they can restrict their consciousness and accept the world around them as it is and never really know or explore who they are, living an inauthentic life. On the next slide is a nice little cartoon that I think helps capture these first 2 dimensions. The next dimension is our own identity, how we define ourselves, and the relationship we have with others. Ultimately, this talks about how we are alone in our experiences, which can be rather scary for people, and so we attempt to make connections to ease that fear. Additionally, we often establish our identity based on those around us. However, this can then be living in an inauthentic life because we are not really exploring who we are as a person. When a person is living authentically, they are then able to know more of who they are, have an established personal identity, and accept the fact that they are truly alone in this world. I really actually like the quote that I have at the bottom here, which is also in your text. No relationship can eliminate existential isolation, but aloneness can be shared in such a way that love compensates for its pain. I think that really does a nice job of capturing the fact that no matter what we do, we live alone. However, people are able to have some sort of shared experience. The fourth dimension is searching for meaning. This can be closely related to relationships that we have with others. Like I said, people often identify who they are based on those they associate with, giving them some sort of meaning. People may also work on regularly adapting or discarding values in order to create their own. This means people are looking to give themselves some sort of direction and have a compass to guide them. If a person is unable to develop new morals or a sense of meaning, this can then cause great distress in a person's life. So it can be up to the counselor to assist the client in redefining morals and helping clients gain a sense of direction and meaning. Again, the next two slides are more cartoons that I think add a little bit of humor to the existential theory.
We have now come to the last two dimensions of existential theory, recognizing that anxiety is a part of life and the acceptance of death and non-being. As I've mentioned before, the previous dimensions, or givens, can create anxiety for people. Existentialism holds the belief that anxiety is simply a part of life no matter what. As people face reality, expand their consciousness, and challenge themselves, they are going to experience some form of anxiety. The text identified two different types of anxiety, normal and neurotic. Normal anxiety is exactly what it sounds like, having an appropriate response to a situation, which can actually be rather motivational for making change in a person. The second, which is neurotic anxiety, is having some sort of reaction that is out of proportion to the situation. So one goal for therapy, as well as living lives and being a human, is to go on living your life with as little neurotic anxiety as possible. The challenge here is who really defines what is considered normal and what is considered neurotic. This is something that you really want to keep in mind when working with your clients to help them define these different terms. The last dimension is the awareness of death and no longer being. This is a concept that people can really struggle with. However, when a person is truly able to grasp this concept, people can begin working towards removing major barriers, gain perspective, and increase motivation to create a meaningful life while decreasing anxiety. As a counselor, you may want to help your client evaluate what they are doing in their life and help encourage them to engage in activities that actually has some sort of value to the client and will gain some sort of sense of meaning for the client. On the next slide is a link at the top which will take you to a YouTube video for the song "The Man Who Lives Forever" by Lord Huron. On the slide are the lyrics to the song. As you listen to the song and read along, I want you to keep in mind the 6 dimensions that you've just reviewed and write down which ones seem to stand out to you most. We will then discuss these in class. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that song. Now let's begin putting this theory into practice. Again, I want to offer up a little case for you so you can apply the information that we now know. This time, the client is an individual who was incarcerated for the past 3 years. Your client is working on getting reestablished in the community, which includes finding work, reconnecting with family and friends, and trying to move beyond their past. The client has a lot of fear about being labeled from their past experiences and losing their identity to being a felon. The client also shared that they are very happy to have their freedom back, or at least part of it since they're on probation, and wants to make sure to not take their life for granted. With all of this in mind, an existential counselor recognizes that therapy is a small part of the client's world. However, the problems that the client is facing will manifest themselves in the counseling relationship. This means that counseling itself is a journey which can parallel what the client is experiencing in the rest of the world. In order for this to happen, the counselor must also be very aware of their own experiences and how they have shaped who the counselor is as a person, including their own values and goals. This is so the counselor is not imposing any of their own beliefs or values onto the client. Lastly, a counselor will keep in mind that clients tend to struggle with at least one dimension, if not multiple dimensions, of the existential theory. So this client who's coming into this session appears to be struggling with multiple dimensions. I want you to take the time to write down what dimensions stand out to you and how you seem to notice those. And then we will discuss these in class. Just as a reminder about the client, this is an individual who was incarcerated for the past 3 years, who is working to get reestablished in the community, including finding work, reconnecting with family and friends, and trying to move beyond the past. The client has a lot of fear about being labeled for their past and losing the identity of being a felon. The client also shared that they are very happy to have their freedom back, or at least part of it, since they are on probation and wants to be sure to not take their life for granted. So now take the time to jot down what dimensions stand out to you that the client is struggling with.
Now let's focus on the way an existential counselor would be in the room with their client. A big piece to the existential theory, much like many other theories, is the relationship and creating a safe space for the client. Making use of the relationship can be the catalyst for change to occur for the client and help them address any major questions, concerns, or anxiety that they may have. Because existential theorists believe therapy is a journey as well as a microcosm of the client's world, the counselor is consistently meeting the client where they are at and allowing for creativity in session in order to meet the client's needs. Another very important piece to the existential way of being that I've mentioned a bit before is that the counselor is very aware of their own experiences, perspectives of things, and has created their own authentic way of being and ways of life. This way, the counselor does not impose any of their own worldviews for the client, but can help assist the client in constructing their own morals, values, and views of the world. So, for this particular client, it's important for the counselor to be very aware of their image on felons and recognizing where certain values may overlap or diverge from the client. It's also important for the counselor to be aware of what it means to be established in the community, how relationships play a role for the counselor, and the ways the counselor contributes to society. When the counselor is aware of all of these different types of things, they can then maintain appropriate boundaries and assist the client in constructing their own values and definitions.
Finally, we move on to the counselor way of doing things with their clients, or the interventions that they might use. As I said before, there is not really a set of specific interventions that an existential counselor does with their clients, like some of the other theories that we've talked about already. Instead, it's much more about helping the client gain responsibility, perspective, and the ability to construct their own meaning. So this might include offering different views to things or perspectives, but it's really allowing the client to create their own definitions and push them to try to look at situations from multiple perspectives on their own. So this can require reflecting on experiences and helping them to redefine the experiences for what they want to do with those experiences. What are the messages or the meaning that they were able to take away from what they've gone through, and then help them apply to how they view the world. So for the client we've already talked about, he's adjusting to being out of jail. So it may be beneficial to get the client to reflect on the past actions that got the individual to where they are now and what that really means. Perhaps defining what a felon means to them or how it fits into part of who they are, but that there's just much more of who they are as a person and how they want then the world to see them. Additionally, looking at relationships and what the person is looking for from them and what the client's responsibility is within those relationships. That can be an opportunity to look at different perspectives for the client as well. This can then be mirrored in session as the counselor can use the therapeutic relationship to hold the client accountable and responsible for their actions. By using the relationship, the client can begin to see how to transfer the experience or make changes to the outside world. So it's a matter of helping the client transfer the experiences that are happening in session and then apply them to the real world. But like I said, there aren't any real clear interventions other than helping the client establish some sort of meaning, perspective, and definition on their lives and on the world.